30 meters to destiny, the fall that rewired a puppy's world. A sleepy May afternoon, a postcard-perfect bridge, and a 3-month-old German shepherd tugging at a brand-new leash. Nothing about the scene hinted at history in the making. Tourists leaned over railings to snap selfies with the Colorado River foaming far below. Dr. Rebecca Morgan paused mid-stride to drink in the view, never guessing the next 10 seconds would fracture her heartbeat forever. One careless cyclist, a startled leap, a collar that slipped like silk and atlas, all ears and innocence plummeted 100 feet into whitewater oblivion. Gasps froze, phones fell silent, and strangers braced to witness tragedy. But the river had other plans, and what clawed its way back to the surface wasn't just a puppy. It was the spark of something miraculous. In the blur that followed an impossible rescue, baffled veterinarians, storms predicted before clouds formed. Atlas began rewriting every rule humans trust. Ready to hear how a fall became a gateway, how a dog learned to read fear like scent and hope like song? Stay with us. By the end, you won't look at any animal or your own instincts the same way again. The sun hung low over the valley, casting long golden fingers across the jagged edges of Granite Ridge Bridge. It was the kind of light that made everything feel softer than it should be. Stone seemed to glow, and even silence shimmered. From a distance, the bridge cut an elegant silhouette over the Elkhorn River, steady and unshaken, despite the current that churned relentlessly below. Nora Vance adjusted the collar of her windbreaker as she stepped onto the pedestrian walkway. Her boots clicked quietly against the weathered planks, each step measured, grounded, like someone who'd spent years walking into danger and learning to make peace with it. At her side walked Kael. The German shepherd pup, just over a year old, was lean muscle wrapped in black and sable fur, his movements still slightly unrefined but gaining confidence with each stride. His tail swayed rhythmically, ears flicking at the distant sounds of riverbirds and tourists. This wasn't his first bridge walk, but it was the first since graduation, since earning his official status as a canine with the Granite Hollow Police Department. And it was their first walk without orders. Nora glanced down at him. "Still weird, huh?" she said softly. "No vest, no commands, no protocol. Just us." Kael looked up, tongue lolling slightly, as if to say, "It's enough." She smiled, even if it didn't quite reach her eyes. The past year had been a blur, an endless sequence of training modules, field tests, tactical drills, and sleepless nights. Kael had passed every one. But it wasn't just his performance that had drawn Nora to him. It was the way he'd looked at her on day one. Steady, quiet, as if he already knew something about her that even her fellow officers didn't. Like he could sense the part of her still carrying grief like shrapnel in the chest. Her brother Danny had died 2 years earlier. Line of duty, same precinct. Same bridge, in fact, only his story hadn't ended with sunlight and second chances. It ended in rain, a stolen car, a guardrail that didn't hold. She hadn't set foot on this bridge since the funeral. But Kael didn't know that. Or maybe he did. He'd been oddly still when they reached the foot of the span earlier, just staring at the arc of steel and shadow, then looking at her. Not pulling forward, not hesitating, just waiting. And now, here they were, together. "Let's make some new memories," she whispered. They stopped halfway across. The view was breathtaking, the river ribboned silver beneath them, fringed with pines that whispered in the breeze. Families walked behind them. A couple leaned on the railing nearby. In the center of all that motion, Kael sat down and exhaled. He rested his chin briefly against Nora's thigh. No command, just contact. She lowered herself next to him, placing a hand between his shoulders. The tension in her body dissolved just a bit. Here, in the gold-tinged stillness, she didn't have to be Officer Vance. She could just be someone who missed her brother, someone who believed that maybe not everything broken stayed that way. "Remember when you were all ears and paws?" she said quietly. "You used to trip over your own excitement." Kael let out a small huff through his nose. His gaze scanned the horizon, tracking movement the way he'd been taught, but there was something else in his eyes now. Something softer, something still. The moment held. And then sudden motion. A cyclist, moving too fast, cut around a blind corner at the bend of the pedestrian path. A pedestrian stepped aside to avoid him, unintentionally swerving into Kael's line of sight. The sharp jolt of energy, the quick shift in air pressure, the abrupt flash of movement, too much, too fast. Kael startled. He stepped back instinctively, just a single step, but the leash jerked tight, and in that split second, Nora lost her grip. The nylon handle slipped through her fingers like smoke. "Kael!" she shouted, but it was already happening. The damaged railing, unseen behind the flower boxes and forgotten after last winter's storms, had a section bent just wide enough to let fate slip through. Kael's back legs hit the opening. His paws scrabbled against concrete, nails screeching. For a split second he hung there, eyes wild, body contorted between solid ground and empty air. Nora lunged, her hand brushing fur just barely too late. And then he was gone. The scream that tore from her throat didn't sound human. It sounded like every nightmare she'd ever swallowed, like every door she never got to kick open in time, like every "I'm sorry, ma'am" she'd ever delivered to another family. The sound of the river swallowed it whole. She ran legs forgetting pain, lungs forgetting oxygen. Around the bend, down the stairwell that wrapped beneath the bridge. People called after her, but she didn't hear them. All she could see was water, endless, roaring, indifferent. "No! No, Kael!" she shouted, voice breaking open. At the base of the bridge, beside the river's edge, a man in a kayak had already launched. His strokes were powerful, panicked. His eyes scanned the foam and fury. Somewhere far away, a child was crying, and somewhere beneath the surface was Kael. It happened in a breath. 1 second, the world was still. Golden light pooled on the bridge. Kael's ears perked as he sat beside Nora, the river below whispering its ancient lullaby. The next second shattered everything. A cyclist rounded the curve far too fast, his tires slicing across the wood planks with a hiss. A pedestrian stepped sideways in surprise, unintentionally cutting too close to Kael. The dog flinched, startled, not from fear, but instinct. Trained reflexes that once saved lives in drills now betrayed him in the real world. Kael stepped back. The leash snapped taut in Nora's hand. She gripped it tight, but the sudden jolt tore it free. Nylon slipped through her palm in a searing rush of friction. "Kael, stay!" she barked, already lunging, but she wasn't fast enough. Time slowed. Kael's hind legs found nothing but air. The metal railing, normally a barrier, a safety net, was broken. One section, still unrepaired after last winter's storm, bowed outward just enough to welcome disaster. His front paws scrambled against concrete. Nails scraped. Pads tore. Brown eyes, wide with confusion, locked on hers for a split second. She dove. Fingers grazed fur. And then he was gone. Nora's scream ripped through the sky like a shot-raw primal, the kind of sound that made everyone within earshot freeze. The kind of scream that comes from watching the thing you love most disappear into a place you can't follow. 30 meters below, the Elkhorn River roared in spring flood. Meltwater from the mountains had turned it vicious rushing currents, hidden rocks, eddies that pulled even the strongest swimmers down. A dog didn't stand a chance. On the water, Adrian Shaw had just finished securing his gear in his bright orange kayak when he saw movement. A flailing shape, small and fast, plunging from the bridge. It wasn't a bird, it wasn't debris, it was a dog. He didn't think. He didn't shout. He just launched. The kayak slammed forward into the current, paddle blades churning. Years of whitewater experience kicked in. His body moved automatically, adjusting to the force of the water, steering toward the impact point. The surface of the river boiled. He scanned frantically, searching for fur, for movement, for any break in the rhythm of the waves. Nothing. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "Come on, little guy." And then, 30 yards downstream, the river broke open. A small head emerged. Kael. His legs paddled frantically, but he was disoriented, swept sideways by a surge, spinning helplessly. He vanished again. On the bridge, someone gasped. Nora was already sprinting down the stairs, her boots pounding, her heart shattering with each step. She didn't cry. She couldn't. There wasn't room. There was only one thought burning like fire. Not him. Please, not him. Adrian caught the glimpse of fur again, closer this time, but the current was faster than he remembered. And worse, Kael was being dragged straight toward danger. A half-submerged strainer, a mass of tangled tree branches, caught in the current like skeletal arms. "No, no, no, don't!" Kael fought, his paddling frantic. He was seconds from hitting the snare. But then something shifted. A floating log nearby, long and slender, moved against the current. Just slightly, just enough. It slid between Kael and the strainer like an unseen hand pushing it into place. The dog slammed into the log instead. It saved his life. Adrian didn't question it. He surged forward, closing the final 15 feet, reaching out with his paddle. "Grab on!" he shouted. Not that the dog could hear him, but maybe, somehow, it understood. Kael's paws landed on the blade, clumsy, soaked, trembling, but they held. And that was enough. Adrian twisted his body, shifting balance, pulling the puppy toward the bow. Kael collapsed across the deck, barely conscious, waterlogged, but breathing. Behind them, the river snarled. Up ahead, salvation waited. And somewhere on the shore, Nora ran harder than she ever had in her life. The kayak cut through the water like a blade through breath, swift and certain, yet never fast enough. Adrian Shaw's shoulders burned with the effort, each stroke fighting the current that refused to be tamed. The Elkhorn River, swollen from spring melt, surged around him like a beast newly awakened. Foam curled in jagged spirals. Churned water glistened under the setting sun like broken glass. "Where are you?" he muttered through gritted teeth. And then there, a flicker of movement. A sodden shadow broke the surface 20 yards downstream. Kael. The dog's head bobbed once, barely staying afloat. Tiny legs kicked weakly, but his strength was fading fast. Adrian angled hard left, the paddle biting deep, spray flying into his face. Kael went under. "No! No! No! Don't you dare!" The rapids pulled Adrian toward a narrow channel ahead, where dead branches twisted like claws. A strainer, deadly, even to kayakers with decades of experience. The same direction Kael had been swept. But fate, or something else, intervened. A long piece of driftwood, gnarled and half-sunken, slid into place across the current. It shouldn't have moved that way. It didn't belong there. But it shifted just enough. Kael slammed into it instead of the snare of death beyond. Adrian didn't question it. He closed the distance. "Hang on, boy." Kael's paws slapped weakly at the surface. Adrian leaned out, heart racing, and extended the paddle. Miraculously, Kael grabbed it. Tiny claws scraped plastic. Adrian shifted his weight, pulled hard, and hauled the drenched body into the kayak. Kael collapsed against his chest, unconscious but breathing. Adrian wrapped an arm around him, shielded him as the kayak pitched violently. The river wasn't done yet. A rogue wave slammed into the hull. The world tilted. Water roared. Kael didn't move. Adrian held tight, body low, instincts screaming. The kayak rocked but didn't flip. Somehow, they made it through. As the water calmed and the shore drew near, Adrian whispered to the dog, barely believing his own words. "You're safe now." And in the circle of his arm, Kael shivered once. Still alive. The kayak skidded into the gravel shallows with a sharp hiss, the hull scraping stone as Adrian leaned forward, cradling the soaked body in his arms. Nora was already there, boots splashing into the edge of the elkhorn, sleeves rolled, eyes wild. "Give him to me," she said, voice breaking. Adrian didn't hesitate. He lifted Kael's limp frame and passed him into her arms. Nora sank to her knees in the cold water, pulling him close, not caring that her jeans were soaked through or that her breath came in ragged gasps. Kael's fur was saturated, his body trembling like a wire stretched too tight. His head lolled against her shoulder, ears twitching once at the sound of her voice. "He's breathing," Adrian said, kneeling beside them. "I kept him warm as best I could." Nora didn't answer. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, checking ribs, limbs, spine. It was instinct vet and officer merging into one, but the facts didn't add up. There was no blood, no visible fractures, no sign of internal damage. "Kael," she whispered, "you shouldn't be alive." A siren echoed in the distance. Emergency services, called in by witnesses on the bridge. Nora looked down at her partner. No, her family. And for a moment, time folded in on itself. Kael's eyes fluttered open. He saw her, and his tail moved, just once, weak, but enough. Around them, people stood frozen in disbelief. One woman whispered, "That fall should have killed him." Another added, "It's a miracle." Nora didn't look up. She pressed her forehead gently to Kael's and whispered, "You held on." And the dog, barely conscious, exhaled softly, as if to say, "So did you." The clinic lights hummed faintly overhead, casting sterile halos across the stainless steel table where Kael lay wrapped in thermal blankets. His fur was still damp beneath the warming pads, but his breathing had steadied, no longer shallow, no longer strained. His chest rose and fell in quiet rhythm, almost too quiet. Dr. Benjamin Wilson stood at the foot of the table, frowning at the scan monitor like it had just told him gravity stopped working. "I don't get it," he muttered, pushing his glasses higher on his nose. "From that height? 30 meters?" He tapped the screen again, almost annoyed. "This doesn't make sense." Nora stood at Kael's side, arms crossed tight, trying to hold herself together with posture alone. Her hands still smelled faintly of river mud and dog shampoo. She hadn't left Kael's side since they rushed him in 2 hours earlier. She didn't blink much, didn't move much, just watched him. Like if she stared hard enough, she'd understand it too. "What are you seeing?" she asked. "Nothing," Dr. Wilson said, too fast. Then again, slower. Nothing. No fractures, no swelling. Spines intact. Ribs clean. No bleeding in the abdomen. No concussion markers. No signs of organ trauma. Hell, he didn't even sprain a damn paw. Nora's eyes stayed locked on Kael, but her voice was steady. You're telling me he survived a 10-story fall into a river, got thrown against rocks, sucked into current, and came out with hypothermia and a few bruises? Not even bruises, Wilson said. Some soft tissue bruising, yeah, superficial scratches. But he's metabolizing lactic acid like he didn't just paddle for his life in freezing water. He leaned back, baffled. Honestly, I've seen worse injuries from slipping on kitchen tile. Silence settled between them, clinical, heavy. Then Kael stirred. Just a small shift, a twitch of the front paw beneath the blanket. His eyes blinked open, slow and drowsy. He looked around the room once and landed on Nora. She stepped forward. Hey, partner? Kael's tail thumped once. Dr. Wilson exhaled. Okay, maybe it was a miracle. Maybe the current broke his fall just right. Maybe the log absorbed impact. Maybe adrenaline got him through. Maybe. He didn't sound convinced. Nora reached out and ran her fingers along Kael's ear, slow and gentle. But that's not what you really think. Wilson hesitated, then said quietly, I think something happened in that river that we don't have language for yet. Nora didn't answer. She didn't have to. She already knew. She'd seen it in Kael's eyes when they locked for that half-second before the fall. And again now, as he looked up at her like he'd gone somewhere and come back with more than just his heartbeat intact. Not just alive, changed. Morning crept into Granite Hollow on tiptoe soft light slanting through the clinic's blinds, carrying the crisp scent of pine after dawn. Inside Exam Room 2, Kael sat erect on the padded mat, posture regal, despite the bandage still clinging to his foreleg. He wasn't dozing like a patient in recovery should. He was listening. Every muscle tuned, as if the silence itself whispered secrets. Nora noticed it while updating his chart. One ear of his flicked, then both stood tall. He cocked his head toward the window where daylight glowed a gentle honeygold. No clouds, no breeze. A perfect forecast, according to every weather app Nora had checked before brewing coffee. Yet Kael's eyes narrowed, pupils dilating the way they had yesterday, right before his vitals spiked on the monitor, an inexplicable pulse of energy that made the ECG jump a beat. What is it, partner? Nora murmured, setting her tablet aside. She knelt, following his gaze to the unblemished sky. See something I don't? Kael didn't blink. Instead he rose, padded to the glass, and pressed his nose against the cool pane. His breath fogged a small circle. Then he sat, perfectly still, waiting. A minute passed. 2. Outside, the maples lining Main Street stood motionless, leaves backlit like stained glass. A jogger trotted past, earbuds in, offering a friendly wave through the clinic window. Nora waved back half-heartedly, her attention still on Kael's unnerving focus. A low, almost imperceptible whine slipped from his throat. Nora glanced at the clock. 8:03 a.m. Okay, she sighed, unlatched the window and lifted it a few inches. A breath of air slipped inside, unexpectedly humid, strangely electric against her skin. Goosebumps prickled her forearms. She caught a faint metallic tang, like ozone before a strike, though the sky overhead remained a canvas of unmarred blue. Kael's tail tapped once. From somewhere distant, a rumble so soft, she wondered if she imagined it rolled across the valley. Then the light shifted, as if an unseen hand dimmed the sunrise. Shadows thickened. High above the church steeple, a single charcoal smear unfurled, sprawling and multiplying with alarming speed. The first drop hit the sill, a fat, heavy splash that startled a sparrow from the gutter. Nora's breath hitched. She'd lived in these mountains her whole life. Storms this sudden were a rarity, especially on a 0% chance of precipitation day. She grabbed her phone, refreshing the Doppler radar. Still clear, still sunny. The digital certainty clashed hard against the thunder now growling with undeniable presence. Within 30 seconds, rain sheeted down in silver rods, drumming the tin awning like 1,000 distant hoofbeats. People sprinted for cover, coats pulled over heads. Wind whipped banners on the lampposts until they cracked like sails. Kael closed his eyes. Not from fear, he settled into something closer to reverence, as though the storm were a song only he could hear correctly. "That's impossible," Nora whispered, transfixed. She watched water rivulets race across the pavement where sunlight had baked chalk hopscotch lines only minutes ago. Thunder boomed closer, deeper. Lights flickered in the ceiling grid. Somewhere down the hall, Dr. Wilson cursed as the X-ray machine reset. Nora knelt beside Kael again. He opened his eyes, met her gaze with a calm so absolute it felt ancient. As lightning forked across the sky, white fire etched on graphite clouds, she saw the reflection flicker in his dark irises. Two storms staring back at each other, one outside, one behind the dog's steady gaze. "You felt it coming," she said, voice barely above the downpour's roar. Saying it aloud made her heart race faster than the thunder. Before anyone, before the radar, before the clouds even formed. Kael nudged her wrist with his muzzle gentle, affirming. Nora's mind skittered through yesterday's impossibilities. The unbroken bones, the unburstable lungs, the perfect vital signs. A dog defying physics. And now a walking barometer forecasting what technology missed entirely. Patterns formed behind her eyes like constellations. Kael staring skyward in the exam room. Kael's ECG pulse seconds before the monitor caught an electrical glitch. Kael's heartbeat sinking to something beyond stethoscopes. She exhaled and reached for the small leather notebook she'd slipped into her scrub pocket at 6 a.m. A habit resurrected from residency days, when strange cases demanded vigil. She flipped to a fresh page. 0803. Kael exhibits heightened alertness. No external stimuli. 0805. Sudden atmospheric shift. Humidity and ozone present. 0806. First thunder. 0807. Rapid storm onset. Conclusion. Anticipatory response predates meteorological detection. She clicked the pen shut, pulse hammering. "This isn't coincidence," she murmured. "It's the beginning." Across the room, the rain eased to a softer hiss, like the storm sighing itself out after emptying its lungs. Sunlight peeked once more through ragged cloud edges, illuminating the gentle spray still clinging to the glass. Steam rose from the street as if the earth exhaled relief. Kael yawned, a long, satisfied stretch, and lay down, head on paws, finally at ease now that the unseen warning he'd carried had spoken its full truth. Outside, car alarms chirped awake, and people emerged from doorways blinking at the sudden return of light, chattering about freak weather and broken forecasts. But Nora barely noticed. She was still kneeling, staring at the dog who had fallen from sky to river to miracle in less than 24 hours, and now, apparently, could read the air like scripture. "Something changed in you," she whispered. "And whatever it is, I'm not letting anyone call it luck again." Kael's tail thumped once in agreement, echoing the last distant roll of thunder, fading toward the horizon. The river smelled different after the storm, earthy, sharp with fresh torn moss and the secret sweetness of crushed wildflowers. Nora felt it even before Kael's ears pinned forward, as if the world itself had leaned in to whisper something neither of them could yet understand. They were supposed to be on a gentle rehabilitation walk. 24 hours since the fall, 12 since the impossible storm. Kael's vitals read textbook perfect, but Nora insisted on a slow pace along the Elkhorn's lower trail. Leash in one hand, coffee in the other, she kept conversation light half-jokes about Kael's unofficial weather app, half-muttered promises that they'd both take it easy for a while. Kael had other ideas. They'd just rounded a bend where cattails stood taller than Nora's shoulders when the leash snapped taut. No warning growl, no playful tug, just raw instinct. Kael's entire body tensed, like an arrow knocked to a bowstring. "Easy," Nora said, tightening her grip. Kael didn't look back. His nose cut through the air in sharp, deliberate arcs, left, right, higher. A soundless question echoed between his breaths. Then he bolted. The leash jerked so hard Nora lost her coffee and nearly her balance. "Kael! Heel!" But the command, once ironclad, met a force stronger than obedience. He dragged her 5 yards before the nylon slipped free of her glove. He vanished into the reeds. Nora's heart lurched. Memories of the bridge cliffed at the edge of her mind, but she shoved them down and sprinted, reeds whipping her arms, mud sucking at her boots. Water splashed up calves still sore from yesterday's panic. She pushed through a curtain of willow branches and found Kael frozen at the riverbank, brow furrowed, stare locked on a tangled lump of drift and trash lodged in the sedge. The river's whisper was louder here, like it, too, was trying to speak. "What is it, boy?" she asked, breath ragged. Kael answered with motion. He nosed into the debris, pawing away a snarl of fishing line and torn plastic. A low whine trembled up his throat, a sound Nora had never heard from him, half plea, half command. Then she heard it, so faint it blended with reeds hissing in the breeze. A mule, weak, broken, impossibly small. Nora's pulse skipped. She dropped to her knees beside Kael, fingers finding the cold slickness of a tied grocery bag wedged beneath a branch. Inside something shifted. "Oh, God." She tore the knot with shaking hands. The plastic peeled back, and the smell hit first. Damp fur, river silt, newborn milk not yet soured. 3 kittens' eyes sealed shut. Umbilical cords still fresh lay motionless in a shallow pool of water that had seeped through a pinhole in the bag. One kitten released a rasping cry. The others barely moved. Nora's training switched on like a floodlight. She scooped the babies into her scarf, blotting water from their noses with frantic thumbs. "They're hypothermic," she muttered, voice vibrating with urgency. "Minutes away, maybe less." Kael edged closer, sniffing each fragile bundle. His ears flattened and he gave a short, insistent bark, an order, not a question. "Right," Nora breathed. "We move." She tucked the kittens inside her jacket, pressing them against her own heat. Kael waited only long enough to see they were secure before turning back the way they'd come, trotting ahead as if every second mattered, and it did. Nora followed, stumbling in Kael's wake, the world shrinking to the pulse of 3 heartbeats too soft to fail. They burst onto the gravel access road just as Dr. Wilson's truck, summoned by Nora's panicked call minutes earlier, skidded to a halt, tailgate rattling. The vet leapt out, arms laden with a heating pad and portable oxygen. "Kael again?" he asked, disbelief tinged with a dawning recognition of pattern. "Not him," Nora said, voice cracking as she transferred the kittens to Wilson's hands. "Because of him!" Wilson's eyes widened at the sight life hanging by a wet thread. He didn't waste breath on questions. Within moments, the kittens were swaddled in warm towels, oxygen tubing whispering against miniature noses. Kael stood beside Nora, chest heaving, river water still dripping from his whiskers. She crouched, wrapping both arms around his neck. He leaned in, solid and warm, grounding her spinning thoughts. "How did you know?" she whispered into his fur. The question tasted futile. She already felt the answer thrumming through his heartbeat. Something silent, ancient, beyond training manuals and brain scans. Wilson straightened from the tailgate. "They're stabilizing," he said, awe softening the clinical edge of his tone. "Another 10 minutes in that bag and—" He shook his head. This dog just rewrote luck twice in 2 days. Nora rose, palm resting on Kael's withers. "He didn't stumble on them," she said quietly. "He dragged me here like a responding unit. He knew." A gust swept off the river, rattling the cattails like applause. Somewhere high above, gulls wheeled against a sky scrubbed clean by last night's storm blue so sharp it looked new. Nora met Wilson's gaze. "We're past coincidence," she said, voice steady now. "And if yesterday's storm was the opening argument, this—" she nodded toward the kittens, mewling louder as warmth returned, "is Exhibit A." Kael sat, head tilting, eyes bright with something that felt too large for the word awareness. Nora's chest tightened, equal parts wonder and responsibility. "I'm starting a log," she told Wilson. "Every incident, every variable." Her fingers found the leather notebook in her pocket. Whatever happened after that fall, Kael's seeing the world on a channel we've never tuned into. Wilson exhaled, amazement softening into resolve. "Then we learn the frequency." Nora glanced down at Kael. "Together." He wagged his tail a single, measured sweep, then looked toward the river as if listening for the next thing only he could hear. Late afternoon light slanted through the clinic's front windows, warm and honey-thick, coating shelves of gauze and pill bottles in a glow that made everything feel harmless. The reception bell chimed, and Mrs. Landry bustled in with Shadow, her sleek coal-black tom tucked beneath one arm like an oversized scarf. Shadow's emerald eyes were half-lidded with catnip-level indifference, tail swishing in an unhurried rhythm. "Just a wellness visit," Mrs. Landry chirped, setting the carrier on the counter. "He's been eating, playing, no complaints. But you know me, better safe than sorry." Nora smiled, though her shoulders sagged with the day's weight. The newborn kittens lay in an incubator down the hall, mewling stronger each hour. Kael freshly bathed, stitches removed, energy resurfacing rested on a blanket by Nora's desk while she updated charts. He'd slept little. Every time a kitten squeaked off beat, his ears pricked, as if tuned to a private emergency frequency. "Routine is good," Nora agreed, leading Mrs. Landry into exam room 4. Inside, Dr. Wilson waited with a clipboard, cracking a joke about Shadow's perfectly villainous fur. Shadow obliged with a throaty purr. Ultra-slick, unbothered, picture of health. Nora knelt to secure the feline scale. Behind her she felt the draft of the hallway door whisper open. Kael padded in, nails silent against linoleum. She'd left him uncrated, trusting his calm. He parked himself just inside the threshold, watchful but unobtrusive. Shadow hopped onto the scale, 4.7 kilos, lean and spry. Nora jotted numbers, then settled the cat on the table for palpation. Wilson's fingers pressed gently along Shadow's rib cage, down the abdomen, everything soft, no palpable masses. Kael's body went stiff. Nora's head whipped around. His hackles weren't raised, but tension rolled off him in heat waves. He stared at Shadow as though the cat had transformed into a ticking bomb. A low grunt, not quite a growl, vibrated in his chest. "Easy, partner," Nora murmured. Mrs. Landry tensed. "He's good with cats, right?" "Normally better than good." Nora stepped between dog and table, laying a steadying hand on Kael's withers. His skin twitched beneath her palm, muscles vibrating like plucked string. He gave a sharp bark once, then pawed the floor, nails scraping. Alert, not aggression. Dr. Wilson paused, eyes narrowing. "Something wrong, Kael?" The dog's gaze snapped to Wilson, then back to Shadow, then to Nora, pleading, insistent. Another bark, louder. He tried to stand on hind legs, front paws hitting the edge of the exam table as if to push everyone back. Shadow hissed, unsettled for the first time. Mrs. Landry's hand flew to her mouth. "What on earth?" Nora's pulse hammered. She remembered the kittens, the storm, patterns, signals. Trust him. She drew a breath. "Ben, run a full abdominal ultrasound." Mrs. Landry blinked. "But he's fine." "Humor me," Nora said gently, though her voice carried the weight of a command. Wilson stared at Kael's unwavering alarm and nodded. "All right. Quick scan." They moved to imaging. Kael followed at heel, still keyed up, but silent now, watching. Shadow lay on the foam cradle, belly slicked with gel, purring again as if eager to prove this was all overkill. The ultrasound wand roamed across the tiny torso. On-screen, grainy landscapes of feline anatomy slid by. Kidneys, liver, spleen, picture perfect. Then a shadow inside shadow. Wilson zoomed. Nora leaned in. A subtle distension near the jejunum 2 uniform for normal chime, too dense for gas. He adjusted gain. The shape resolved into an oblong opacity, tucked like a hidden dagger. "Well, I'll be," Wilson breathed. Mrs. Landry clutched the table edge. "Is that—" "Foreign body," Nora finished softly. "Early obstruction. Something smooth, maybe rubber." She swallowed. "We caught it, just as it lodged. Hours from now, he'd be vomiting, dehydrated. A day, maybe 2, and we'd be talking perforation, sepsis." Shadow meowed, blissfully unaware of his near future. Kael exhaled a long, low breath, tension draining from his muscles like sand from a broken hourglass. He sat, tail sweeping the floor once in completion. Mrs. Landry's eyes filled. How did he know?" Nora glanced at Kael. "Same way he sensed the storm, the kittens. He listens to what we don't hear." Wilson scheduled immediate endoscopic retrieval. Nora stepped out with Kael while the team prepped. In the hallway's quiet, she knelt, cupping his face. "That was good work," she whispered. He licked her knuckle, then nudged the breast pocket where her leather notebook lived. She smiled, promise kept. She flipped pages, added a new entry. 1542. Kael indicates distress toward feline patient with no clinical signs. 1548. Abdominal ultrasound reveals early jejunal obstruction. Outcome: life-saving intervention scheduled before symptom onset. She capped the pen, emotions swelling, a mix of awe and responsibility so large it almost hurt. Kael leaned into her chest, grounding the moment. Down the corridor, Mrs. Landry's voice trembled words of gratitude to an anesthetist. Without Kael, she might have gone home to a purring cat and a ticking countdown no one could see. Nora rose, fingers still woven in Kael's fur. "We keep logging," she told him softly, "and we keep listening." Kael's tail wagged, twice agreement written in silence. The clinic quieted after sundown, trading the day's rustle of charts and chatter for the muted hum of refrigeration units and the slow tick of a lobby clock. Nora hadn't meant to stay this late, yet here she was, backlit by a desk lamp, forearms buried in a nest of sticky notes, her leather notebook open to a fresh page that smelled faintly of ink and resolve. Kael slept nearby, chin on crossed paws, ears flicking now and then at phantom sounds only he seemed to hear. The newborn kittens dozed in the incubator across the hall, bellies round and content after their evening feed. Shadow, post-endoscopy, purred in recovery like a smug engine. Lives saved, crises averted, thanks to the dog currently chasing silent dreams across clinic linoleum. Nora tapped her pen twice, exhaled, and began to write. Entry 04. Anomalous anticipatory behaviors. Doorbell, predictive barking, 07:12 a.m. Kael stationed himself at front door 15 seconds before delivery driver rang bell. Phone call. Anticipation, 09:47 a.m. Kael retrieved my cell from kitchen counter, delivered to me. Phone rang in hand at 09:48, unknown number. Water dish alert, 13:26 p.m. Kael nudged stainless bowl 3 minutes before float valve failed. Prevented spill. Shadow obstruction detection, 15:42 p.m. See medical report, REF 2025-06-20 FEL-03. She paused, underlined the last bullet, twice the ink-carving conviction into paper. Patterns were congealing, threads pulling tight around a center she couldn't yet name, but could feel pulsing every time Kael's gaze turned distant. Something bigger was at work, something operating on wavelengths no instrument in the clinic could register. Nora flipped back through earlier entries. The sudden storm, the kittens in the reeds, the inexplicable recovery from a deadly fall. Each line read like fiction, yet everyone bore real timestamps, real witnesses, real lives altered. She closed her eyes, letting the weight of it crest, then settle. "This is beyond veterinary science," she muttered. But who could she trust with it? She pushed back in her chair, rolling to the computer. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, indecisive, until memory supplied a name. Dr. Alma Reeves, the canine cognition researcher, who had once given a guest lecture during Nora's undergrad days, when Nora still entertained dreams of blending behavioral science with field work. Reeves had spoken about sensory thresholds in military dogs, about neural plasticity sparked by trauma and extreme environments. Her research emails ended with an invitation Nora had filed away and forgotten. "If you ever meet a dog who feels like a walking question mark, call me." Nora clicked open a browser, typed Colorado State University Cognitive Canine Lab. Dr. Reeves' profile surfaced, same keen eyes behind rectangular frames, same smile that hinted at a fondness for mysteries. The contact field provided a direct address. Nora's pulse quickened. She drafted an email. Subject, urgent inquiry, canine perceptual anomalies post-trauma. Dr. Reeves, we met briefly in 2022 at Granite Hollow PD's Canine Symposium. I'm Officer Nora Vance, formerly veterinary resident. My canine partner survived a 30-meter fall with no injury and has since exhibited anticipatory behaviors that defy current understanding. detailed logs attached. We are documenting systematically but need guidance on rigorous testing protocols and ethical oversight. Are you available for consultation? She hesitated, then added, I believe this dog may redefine what we know about interspecies perception. A click. The email soared into cyberspace. No turning back. A soft bark broke the hush. Nora turned. Kael was awake, watching her with an expression uncannily knowing, tail sweeping once along the floor, as if he understood she'd just shifted the orbit of their lives. You okay? She asked. He yawned, rose, stretched, then trotted to the front door, planting himself there, gaze fixed on the knob. Nora frowned, checked her smartwatch. 10:18 p.m. No scheduled clients, no deliveries. She opened her mouth to speak when headlights flared through the frosted glass, an unmarked sedan rolling into the gravel lot. Footsteps approached. Knock, knock, knock. Exactly as Kael sat straighter, expectant. Nora unlocked and cracked the door. Deputy Morales, night shift, stood with a sheepish grin. Forgot my duty notebook at weigh-in earlier, he said. Thought I'd grab it before the morning audit. Nora laughed under her breath. Amazed not at Morales, but at Kael's clockwork premonition. She retrieved the notebook, traded pleasantries, and watched the deputy drive off. When she closed the door, Kael had already returned to his blanket. Mission accomplished. Show off, she teased softly. He answered by flopping onto his side, huffing in faux indifference. Back at her desk, the computer pinged. New mail. Reeves, Alma. Nora's breath caught as she opened it. Officer Vance, your summary is riveting and concerning in the best scientific sense. I've cleared my schedule. I can be in Granite Hollow by Friday morning with portable EEG and olfactory field equipment. Please have environment controlled and any pertinent medical records ready. This could change everything. Below the signature, a postscript. P.S. Trust your logs. They're the map through the unknown. Nora leaned back, exhaling a laugh that trembled with relief and fear alike. Her fingers closed around the pen once more. In the notebook's margin she wrote, Phase 2, Verification. She looked at Kael, already asleep again, chest rising in calm waves. Outside, the valley lay wrapped in the hush of oncoming midnight. Somewhere below that quiet skin, currents of data, an instinct, and something older than language pulsed, guiding a dog who read the world's invisible ink. Nora capped the pen, shut the notebook, and whispered into the dim, We're not alone in this mystery anymore, partner. Let's see where the map leads. Friday dawned crisp and cloudless, as if the valley itself wanted nothing to obscure what was about to unfold. Nora stood on the clinic's front steps, palms tucked in the pockets of her field jacket, eyes fixed on the ribbon of county road that curved between pines. Kael sat at her heel, uncharacteristically still, ears forward, tail draped calm yet ready. He'd woken before sunrise, circling the hallway with an alertness that made Nora suspect he'd sensed today's guest long before the white Subaru Outback finally appeared, sunlight sparking off its windshield. The vehicle rolled to a stop. Out stepped Dr. Alma Reeves, tall, lean, silver-streaked hair pulled into a low knot. She wore trail boots and a charcoal blazer over a Colorado State hoodie, the ensemble of someone equally comfortable in a lecture hall or a mountainside mudslide. She slung a slim equipment case over one shoulder and surveyed the modest clinic like a detective arriving at a scene already alive with clues. Nora descended the steps, extending a hand. Dr. Reeves, thank you for coming on such short notice. Curiosity doesn't like waiting rooms, Reeves replied, gripping Nora's hand with a decisive shake. Her eyes, gray, sharp, laced with small crow's feet, shifted to Kael. "And this must be my mystery." Kael rose, ears pricking. Instead of bounding forward, he approached in measured steps, gaze steady, a quiet gravitas that belied his age. He stopped 2 feet away and simply watched her. Reeves crouched, unconcerned about dust on her blazer, and held out her palm. "Permission granted if you're willing." Kael sniffed once, exhaled, and placed his paw deliberate gentle into her hand. Reeves arched a brow, soft amusement tugging at her mouth. "Well," she murmured, "aren't you a polite paradox?" Nora's tension loosened. He read the weather, found kittens, diagnosed a cat, and, well, you've seen my notes. "I did," Reeves said, rising. "And if even half of what you logged is accurate, he's operating somewhere beyond traditional sensory thresholds." She patted the equipment case. "Let's get to work." Test room A had been stripped bare that morning. Exam table pushed aside, kennels removed, leaving an open space flanked by 2 drywall partitions Nora and Wilson had erected at dawn. Behind one partition, an aluminum toolbox sat on the floor. Behind the other, a simple cardboard shoebox. Both objects were invisible from the center of the room. Reeves laid out her gear, a compact EEG headband, modified for canine skull shape, a portable olfactometer, and a set of signal clickers. She explained the protocol while fitting the EEG nodes around Kael's head, the sensors resting like a metallic crown against his fur. "Baseline first," she said. "We run a simple 3-choice task. 1 neutral wall, 1 hides food, 1 hides non-food metallic object, no sense above ambient levels." She glanced at Nora. "You keep silent, no gestures. We want pure response." Kael sat, patient as a saint, while Reeves calibrated the equipment. A soft beep signaled readiness. Reeves took 3 steps back. "Begin." Nora released Kael's leash. He didn't rush. He stood, sniffed the air once, then walked directly to the partition on the left. Neutral wall paused, ears swiveling as if ticking through frequencies. Reeves tapped a key on her tablet, capturing EEG readings in real time. Peaks bloomed on the graph. Kael pivoted to the center partition behind which Wilson had hidden the shoebox. Without hesitation, he sat classic alert posture, then rapped the drywall twice with his paw. Reeves blinked. "Indication of target, though it shouldn't smell like anything," she muttered. She walked behind the partition, lifted the shoebox lid, revealing a child's plastic whistle. Non-food, low-scent compound, metallic and polymer. She noted Kael's choice on her sheet. He rose before she finished, padded to the rightmost partition, sniffed once, then wagged his tail, confirmation behavior typical in scent detection dogs. Reeves retrieved the hidden pouch of liver treats. "Second target identified." "Less than 60 seconds, Nora said quietly. "No scent markers you didn't design." Reeves smiled, the expression half thrill, half disbelief. "And EEG shows early gamma spike before he moved anticipatory pattern we see when an animal predicts reward before stimuli." Her fingers drummed the tablet. "Let's remove food completely." They reset. This time, all partitions hid identical metal tins, each empty. Reeves crossed her arms. "If he's guessing, probability drops." Nora released him again. Kael paused longer, now head tilting, as if listening to a distant hum. Then he went to the left partition, pressed his nose to the wall, and looked back at Reeves, tail still. Reeves's brow furrowed. She opened the partition. Empty tin. Neutral. Kael trotted to the center partition, repeated the stare. Empty. Right partition same. Nora frowned. False negatives? Kael, now standing in the center of the room, turned a slow circle, nose lifted like a satellite dish scanning static. Suddenly he barked, once faced the north wall of the clinic, a solid expanse 10 feet away, not part of the test enclosure. He sat, eyes locked on the dry wall as if it could speak. Reeves and Nora exchanged looks. Reeves strode toward the wall. "What's behind here?" "Storage closet," Nora said, puzzled. "Unscented supplies." Reeves pushed the door open. Shelves of paper towels, saline 4 bags, and mid-shelf an open container of cat kibble Wilson must have left after lunch rounds. She laughed under her breath. "He ignored your control set because he detected an unplanned variable outside the experiment." She rejoined Kael, kneeling. "You cheeky scientist." Kael's mouth parted in a soft pant as if amused. Reeves checked the EEG. Another gamma surge milliseconds before he barked. "He predicted reward without prior conditioning," she mused. "We may be dealing with cross-modal integration on steroids." "English?" Wilson called from the doorway, arms folded. Reeves stood. "He's correlating stimuli faster than we can present them. Scent, sound, maybe electromagnetic cues we can't know yet, but the anticipatory neural pattern is clear." She removed the EEG, smoothing Kael's fur. "Next test, unspoken commands." She positioned Kael in a sit. Handler steps behind two-way mirror, gives silent commands only via mental imagery of each standard cue. She fixed her gaze on Nora. "I want you to picture heel, down, then speak only if he fails." Nora swallowed, felt ridiculous, and moved behind the mirrored glass. She closed her eyes, imagined Kael trotting to her side, then laying down. On the other side, Kael stood, ears flicking. He padded to the mirror's edge exact spot, aligning with Nora's unseen shoulder, and sat. Then, without verbal cue, lowered into a down, chin-on pause. Wilson let out a slow whistle. Reeves' pen scratched furiously across her pad. "This is unprecedented." Kael lifted his head, looking straight through the mirror as if he could see Nora's racing heartbeat on the other side. In the hallway later, Reeves packed away equipment, enthusiasm sparking like live wire. "Your logs were understatement," she told Nora. "He's operating beyond fifth sense synergy, possibly a form of interoceptive resonance. I'll need full cranial imaging, advanced EM field mapping." "Whatever he needs," Nora said, though worry threaded her voice. "But he's not a lab rat." Reeves met her gaze with unexpected softness. "Agreed. We protect him. But, Officer Vance, understand. Dogs changed human history, once fire, hunt, hearth. Kael may be the next revolution." Inside the test room, Kael sat amid partitions and cables, tail sweeping a slow half-circle on the tile, eyes bright with a knowledge only he could divine, waiting, perhaps, for the world to catch up. The first Saturday of June unfurled like a watercolor soft blue sky, toddler pink clouds drifting above Granite Hollow's Riverside Park. Families spilled across the green in picnic clusters. Guitars strummed lazy chords. The air tasted of grill smoke and wild lilac. Nora and Dr. Alma Reeves strolled side by side along the central path, Kael trotting a half-step ahead, his gait relaxed yet precise, as if every footfall was a deliberate choice. Reeves carried a slim data logger clipped to her belt, still buzzing with the morning's EEG readings. One field day won't produce peer-reviewed data. she said, "but I want to see him in uncontrolled environments." Her voice held both academic detachment and the quiver of someone who had glimpsed the edge of a mystery and refused to blink. "Just another walk to him," Nora replied, though she felt the low-grade hum of vigilance that tracking Kael now required. She'd caught herself noting the micro-shifts of his ears, the nuanced twitch in his tail subtitles to a language she was learning in real time. They passed a gazebo where a bluegrass trio tuned fiddles. Kael slowed, nose lifting into a breeze that carried barbecue spices and the faint tang of river water. His ears pricked at a canine yip near the playground, but he kept moving, no urgency. Reeves glanced at her watch. Ambient noise, multiple novel odors, numerous animals. Perfect sensory overload. "Unless you're him," Nora said. They reached an open lawn bordered by picnic tables. To the right, a chocolate Labrador lounged beneath a bench-tongue lolling, tail drumming. A boy of perhaps 7 knelt beside her, rummaging in a bright red lunch cooler. His mother, distracted by a toddler buckling herself into a toy wagon, kept half an eye on the scene. Kael's head snapped toward them, not startled, locked. The shift was so sudden Nora felt it like static on her skin. "Kael?" she said. He stiffened, weight pitched forward as if bracing against an invisible wind. Then, without a single bark to warn, he bolted. Nora reacted a heartbeat too late. The leash slipped through her fingers, hot friction burning her palm. Reeves cursed softly, sprinting after dog and handler. Kael bounded across 30 feet of lawn, weaving between lawn chairs and picnic blankets with the fluid urgency of a search-and-rescue sprint. Gasps rippled through onlookers. "Whose dog is that? Watch your plates!" "Hey!" Nora raced behind him, pulse hammering. At the picnic table, the Labrador lifted her head just as the boy produced a shiny, red-box chocolate-covered espresso beans. Nora recognized in the split second before Kael reached them. The lid was still sealed. No scent marker could have escaped the factory wrap. Yet Kael's hackles rose as he skidded to a halt, inches from the child. The boy froze, wide-eyed. The dog barked in surprise. Kael did not snap or growl. He planted himself between the chocolate and the Labrador, broad chest shielding. Then he nudged the box from the child's hands with a decisive flick of his muzzle. It tumbled onto the grass. "Kael, down!" Nora commanded, arriving breathless. He obeyed instantly, dropping to a sphinx-like crouch, but keeping his body angled protectively. The mother rushed over, toddler on her hip, alarm etching her features. "What is happening?" "Ma'am, I'm sorry," Nora said, heartbeat strumming her throat. She scooped up the box, showed the label. 70% dark chocolate espresso bites. Chocolate is toxic to dogs. Even a few grams could hospitalize her. The woman blinked, realization dawning. Ben, where did you get that?" "Cooler," the boy murmured, eyes still fixed on Kael. "I thought Coco would like a treat." Reeves arrived, data logger still clutched in one hand. She knelt, running quick hands along Kael's flank. "Pulse elevated but steady," she murmured, equal parts scientist and believer. "He knew." The mother exhaled a shaky laugh, then turned to Nora. "He's a hero, isn't he?" Nora's gaze flicked to Reeves, then back to Kael. "Yes," she said simply. "He is." They spent the next minutes reassuring mother, boy, and bewildered Labrador. When calm returned, Nora clipped the leash back on. Kael's posture eased. The crisis, in his mind, was over. They retreated to a quiet stretch beneath cottonwoods. Reeves crouched beside Kael, eyes shining with something close to wonder. "Explain the impossible," she said softly. "Sealed container, wind at his back, 30-foot distance, hundreds of competing scents, and he isolated the neurotoxin before exposure. Instinct? Nora offered, though the word felt flimsy now. Reeves shook her head. Instinct is pattern recognition on a hardwired loop. This, she tapped her temple, is preemptive cognition. He didn't react to a stimulus. He reacted to a probability no instrument could measure. She rose, pacing a short line. Every test in controlled settings points to the same anomaly. His anticipatory neural spikes occur before scent detection thresholds. It's as if his brain parses environmental data at quantum resolution. English, Doc. He's reading what will happen, not just what is happening. Nora stared at Kael now, sniffing a dandelion with the casual curiosity of any young dog, and felt the canyon widen between ordinary and extraordinary. Reeves exhaled, shoulders squaring. I'm convinced. We proceed to Phase 3 magnetoencephalography, Faraday cage trials, multi-species interaction studies. Nora arched a brow. That sounds, invasive. Non-invasive tech, Reeves assured. But yes, deeper. And we'll need to document in peer-reviewed detail. This could revolutionize early warning systems, earthquake detection, medical diagnostics. Her words trailed as Kael glanced up at them, head tilted, ears swiveling east. A heartbeat later, distant sirens wailed along the highway, ambulance lights flickering between pine trunks like frantic fireflies. Reeves followed his gaze, astonished. He heard that before the wind did. Nora's phone buzzed. Dispatch text. Multiple vehicle collision, mile 48. She met Kael's eyes. Something balanced their urgency and calm interlaced like the braided rope of his leash. He wagged once, almost imperceptible, as if to say, "We're not done yet." Reeves slipped the data logger into her pocket, expression settling into resolve. "Whatever boundaries we thought existed," she said, "this dog just erased them." Nora clipped the leash shorter, ready to move. "Then we'll draw new lines," she murmured, scratching Kael behind the ear. "And he'll show us where." They stepped out from beneath the cottonwoods, sun dappling through leaves, sirens receding into the distance. Kael trotted ahead, one ear tuned to the unseen, the other to the world trying desperately to catch up. Night settled over Granite Hollow in a hush of cricket music and pine-scented air. Inside the clinic's break room, the overhead lights were dimmed to a single desk lamp, its amber circle illuminating a scatter of EEG printouts, scent map overlays, and Reeves's field notes inked margins blooming with exclamation points and question marks. Nora paced the narrow aisle between wall and table, arms folded tight to contain the crackle of adrenaline left behind by the day's park incident. Kael dozed at her feet, chest rising in slow, unbothered arcs. Every so often his whiskers twitched, as if he were chasing the memory of wind. Reeves stood by the whiteboard she'd commandeered, marker tapping her lower lip. Equations, neural regions, and fractal scribbles sprawled behind her like constellations. "Start from physics," she said at last, breaking the fragile silence. "Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, merely transferred. Trauma often rewires neural networks, but rarely grants new bandwidth." She turned, eyes alight. "Unless the trauma forces a system-wide reroute." Nora stopped pacing. "You think the fall rewired him?" "Not just rewired, reformatted." Reeves flicked off the cap, sketched a quick dog's brain, olfactory bulb, auditory cortex, limbic loop. A German shepherd's sense of smell outranks ours by magnitudes. But what if sudden, near-fatal multi-system stress ruptures inhibitory pathways, essentially lifting built-in governors Mother Nature installs to keep perception from overwhelming cognition? Like popping a circuit breaker, Nora murmured. Exactly. Except instead of shutting down, his brain rerouted the surge into latent circuitry. Reeves circled an area deep in the midbrain. Regions we barely map: interoception, magnetoreception, quantum-level detection of electromagnetic fluctuation. Birds use it to migrate, sharks to hunt. Maybe dogs have dormant fragments, vestigial until Kael fell. Nora pulled a chair, sat, gaze fixed on Kael. 30 meters, she whispered. Everything said he should have died. Reeves softened. Sometimes survival itself is data. Impact velocity, hydrostatic shock, hypoxia, immediate resuscitation, each a variable. Together they could have snapped synaptic pruning wide open, forging hyperplastic connections. She drew arrows branching outward, reaching beyond the whiteboard's edges. He's not just sensing the world. He's perceiving strata we don't access. Chemical, electric, maybe cognitive. Cognitive? Nora echoed. Reeves nodded, excitement trembling her marker. Your logs show anticipatory spikes seconds before external events. Doorbell, phone, storm cell forming. That suggests he's bridging outward sampling micro-changes long before human instrumentation. Add today's chocolate incident. 0 scent leak, yet he targeted the sealed toxin from 30 feet. He's reading probability curves in real time. Nora rubbed her temples. So what do we call this? Precognition? Reeves shook her head. Precognition implies mystical foresight. This is data integration beyond typical bandwidth. The term I'm leaning toward, she wrote 2 bold words on the whiteboard. Consciousness bridging. Kael's neural network is bridging his consciousness with signals embedded in the environment and potentially with ours. Nora felt a chill despite the warm lamplight. You mean that unspoken command test he read my thoughts? Not mind reading, Reeves corrected gently. More like he tuned to the subtle biological telemetry your body produced when you imagined the command microelectrical skin potentials, heart rate variance, perhaps even the electromagnetic field generated by neural firing in your motor cortex. The fall may have granted him a sensory palette broad enough to translate those signatures into actionable information. Silence stretched, filled only by the rustle of distant pines. Nora looked down at Kael. And we're just walking around with such noise, oblivious. Reeves offered a half smile. Humans are brass bands. We just can't hear the song. Nora's gaze drifted to the park data sheet. Chocolate saved, child educated, Labrador alive. If your theory's right, he could become the blueprint for early warning systems, disease detection, disaster prediction, or weaponization. Reeves added quietly, dark eyebrows knitting. We must be careful. Scientific curiosity draws funding. Funding draws agendas. A knot formed in Nora's gut. She thought of defense contractors, biotech investors, the vultures that circled any breakthrough. Her hand slid toward Kael's fur, fingers threading the soft ruff at his neck. He's not for sale. Reeves met her eyes, fierce agreement glinting. Then we publish transparent data, open access, make secrecy impossible. Nora exhaled. Where do we start? Multimodal imaging, Reeves said, flipping pages in her notebook. Meg in a Faraday cage to track cortical lightning, micro airflow chambers to rule out scent clues, heart rate variability mapping between handler and dog during silent commands. She paused, marker hovering. But it begins with one decision. you and Kael consenting to move forward." Nora looked at her partner, at the steady breath, the gentle twitch of paws dreaming. He'd saved strangers twice, saved himself once, and now stood poised to save more than they could comprehend. She thought of Danny, her brother, who'd believed in service even when the world made it thankless. She nodded. "We move forward, but on our terms. He's family first, subject second." Reeves capped her marker, smile returning. "Agreed. Family is the best control group anyway." Kael stirred, blinking up at them. He rose, padded to the whiteboard, and sniffed the words, "consciousness bridging." His tail gave a single, measured wag, as if endorsing the term, or perhaps the promise behind it. Nora chuckled, tension melting into warmth. "Looks like the co-author approves." Reeves laughed softly. "Then let's write the paper that changes how the world listens." Outside, night deepened. Stars emerged one by one, each a distant pulse of impossible information waiting to be read. Inside the clinic, a theory was born. Half science, half awe, and at its center, a dog who had fallen through the cracks of nature's rule book and risen with a map none of them could yet fully read, but all of them were ready to follow. Lake Carson spread like polished glass beneath the late June sun, its mirror surface broken only by glints of canoe paddles and the distant laughter of college kids on paddleboards. Nora normally avoided crowds since Kael's awakening. Unpredictability stacked variables she couldn't control. But Dr. Reeves had insisted on another field observation, naturalistic stressor testing, she called it, and Lake Carson's weekend bustle offered the perfect crucible. They chose a shaded strip of shoreline near the boathouse. Reeves set up a discreet tripod with a data logger, adjusting its mic toward Kael's collar. Nora laid a blanket, eyes sweeping the lake like radar. Families picnicked, teenagers flung frisbees, lifeguards lounged atop red stands, whistles glinting at their chests. Kael lay sphinx-still beside Nora for nearly an hour, tracking butterflies and toddlers with equal calm. Then, without warning, his head lifted, ears pricked to a frequency none of them could hear, nose slicing the air as if catching scent carried beneath sunlight. Nora felt the now familiar prickle at her spine. "Talk to me, partner." Kael's muscles coiled. A tremor ran through his flank. A silent alarm bell nobody else could hear. He bolted. "Kael!" Nora was on her feet, sprinting after him, Reeves close behind with the camera still rolling. Kael hit the water at a dead run, exploding through the shallows. Swimmers yelped as he torpedoed past, paws churning white froth. 20 yards out, he dove, vanishing beneath the lake's placid veneer. Gasps rippled across the beach. A whistle shrieked. 2 lifeguards kicked off their stands, launching into the water. Nora's boots pounded the dock planks. Reeves scaled a bench, scanning the surface through her viewfinder. Seconds dragged. 1, 2, 4 empty. Then the lake erupted. Kael surfaced with a flash of sable fur and something pale in his jaws and arm. A girl's arm. She was limp, eyes rolled, hair fanned like kelp. Kael clenched her t-shirt collar, keeping her face above water while treading with powerful back legs. Lifeguards reached them, shock painted across their features. They transferred the girl onto a rescue board. Kael released only when steady hands secured her. Nora exhaled shakily, chest burning. She waded knee-deep as the crew powered toward shore, Kael paddling beside. On land, EMTs burst through the crowd, cutting away damp clothing, tilting the girl's head. A cough, ragged as tearing cloth, hacked from her lungs. Water spewed. She seized once more, body shaking, then sagged, breathing shallow but present. A bystander caught it all on a phone camera: the dog's dive, the rescue, the girl's first breath. Another angle captured Reeves's tripod footage, zoomed tight on Kael's unwavering grip. In the commotion, Nora knelt and ran her hands down Kael's sides. His heartbeat thundered beneath drenched fur, but soon leveled, as if daring calamity was routine. She searched his eyes and saw no fear, only the calm certainty of a navigator who had followed an unseen beacon to its source. "What did you hear?" she whispered. He licked lake water from her sleeve, then sat, gaze fixed on the ambulance where paramedics stabilized the teenager. Nora followed his line of sight. A pill bottle had spilled from the girl's beach bag, a bright orange prescription for epilepsy, half full. An older brother, face ashen, fumbled it back into the bag, realization dawning that a skipped dose in cold water could have ended a life. Reeves reached them, adrenaline bright on her cheeks. All sensors picked a spike 2 seconds before he bolted gamma activity off the charts. He clocked the distress before the seizure hit the surface. The ambulance doors slammed. Siren lights spun across Kael's wet coat like quicksilver. Crowds parted, murmurs swelling. "Did you see that dog?" How did he know? He dove before anyone even whistled. Phones rose like a forest of antennae. Live streams ignited. By the time the ambulance pulled away, hashtags bled across social media. #Lake. Carson Miracle Dog, our canine guardian. News vans rerouted, buzzing with coordinates of a canine savior. Nora clipped the leash back on, though she knew Kael didn't need it. Reporters converged, microphones thrust like spears. "Officer Vance, how did your dog... Is he trained for water rescue? Does he predict seizures?" Reeves stepped forward, authoritative. "No statements until the girl's family is briefed." She shielded Kael with her body, but the cameras kept rolling. A local anchor pushed through. "Just one comment, officer." Nora lifted a hand, palm steady. "He's not a headline," she said, voice firm but calm. "He's a partner who did his job. Our focus is the girl's recovery." Yet the tide wouldn't recede. Notifications pinged Nora's phone in staccato bursts. Interview requests, sponsorship offers, demands from medical institutes. Reeves's eyes met hers over the sea of lenses, an unspoken question. "Are we ready for this storm?" Nora answered with the faintest nod. They'd theorized, tested, logged. Now the world had witnessed what they could barely explain. She crouched, whispering close to Kael's ear, the crowd noise dulling to a distant roar. "You keep saving them, partner. I'll keep them from tearing you apart." Kael pressed his wet forehead to her shoulder, a silent covenant. Behind them, Lake Carson lay smooth again, as if the water itself had sighed in relief, holding, somewhere in its depths, the echoes of a crisis averted by a dog who could read tremors in time before they broke the surface. The clinic's waiting room glowed with late afternoon serenity sunlight pooling through tall windows, dust motes drifting like lazy snow. The newborn kittens slept in their incubator, tiny chests rising in rhythm with the soft tick of the wall clock. Nora leaned over the reception desk, finishing discharge papers for Shadow, whose post-surgery swagger now included a child-sized cone he wore like reluctant armor. Kael lay beneath the counter, paws crossed, seemingly at rest after the whirlwind of interviews and calls that had flooded the clinic since the Lake Carson rescue. But every so often his ears flicked as though tuned to a frequency buried beneath the harmony of ordinary life. At 4:57 p.m. that frequency cracked open. Kael's head shot up. His eyes locked on the west wall, the one lined with framed certifications, and the clinic's annual holiday portrait. A low, vibrating growl rumbled from his throat. Nora paused mid-signature. "What is it, partner?" she asked, voice kept light for the benefit of waiting clients. Kael surged forward, nails scrambling against tile. He planted himself nose to drywall, barking in staccato bursts loud, frantic, unlike any previous alert. The sound ricocheted through the foyer, startling a spaniel in the corner into anxious whining. "Kael, down!" Nora commanded, stepping around the desk. He didn't down. Instead, he reared on hind legs, scratching at the wall as if the plaster itself were alive. His bark climbed in pitch, urgent, insistent. Dr. Wilson emerged from the hallway, brow furrowed. "What's gotten into him?" "I don't know." Nora crouched, heart quickening. He's never false alerted before. She pressed her palm to the dry wall, no heat, leaned close, no smell of smoke. Yet Kael's whole body shook with conviction. Reeves appeared beside Wilson, tablet in hand. "Gamma spikes on his collar sensor," she said, scanning data. "Something's triggering high alert." Nora straightened, decision crystallizing. "Everyone, out of the waiting room, please." She ushered Mrs. Landry and Shadow toward exam room 2, apologized to another patient, then grabbed the phone. "Granite Electric," the receptionist answered. "This is Officer Nora Vance at Hollow Creek Veterinary. I need an emergency diagnostic on interior wiring possible short in the west wall. Time critical. We can get a tech there in 45, make it 15. K9 unit indicates imminent risk." She injected enough command into the request that the receptionist faltered, then agreed. Nora hung up, turning to find Kael still drilling the wall with his bark. She pulled him back gently by the collar. He resisted, eyes wide, breath fast. "It's okay," she soothed, though she felt anything but sure. "Help's coming." Minutes stretched long and taut. The kittens mewed. Somewhere a phone rang unanswered. Wilson checked wall outlets with a non-contact voltage tester silent. Reeves recalibrated her sensors, muttering about EM interference. Kael paced in figure eights, never leaving sight of the wall. At 5:12 p.m., an electrician in a lime green vest arrived, tool bag clanking. "Heard you've got a hot wall," he joked, until Kael's teeth flashed in a bark inches from his kneecap. He blanched. "Right. Show me." He killed power to the west circuit, unscrewed the faceplate of an outlet Kael had been pawing. As he tugged the receptacle forward, a spark snapped bright white, vicious. Everyone flinched. "Jesus," the tech breathed. He pulled a scorched screw from blackened plastic. Sheathings melted. Wire shorted against the box looks like rodents chewed through insulation. This close to igniting the stud. "How close?" Nora asked. He glanced at a handheld thermometer. "Temp climbed 90 degrees in the last hour. 2, maybe 3 more minutes at load and the stud goes up with that insulation. You'd have had flame inside the wall cavity before the smoke alarms ever chirped." The weight of almost disaster settled over the room like ash. Nora pictured electrical fire racing through the old rafters, newborn kittens trapped in plastic warmth, clients scrambling for exits. Her knees wobbled. She knelt and gathered Kael's face in her hands. His heartbeat thudded steady against her palms, a metronome marking seconds he'd just returned to them. "You did it," she whispered. "Another life saved ours this time." Kael licked the edge of her thumb, a humble punctuation mark. Reeves exhaled a shaky laugh, wiping mist from her lenses. "Consciousness bridging just crossed from theory to household safety protocol," she said, voice hushed with awe. Wilson squeezed Nora's shoulder. "Write that in your log." She would every detail. 1657 initial bark, 1712 discovery, measured wire temp, gamma spike amplitude. But for now she pressed her forehead to Kael's, letting gratitude quiet the what-ifs clamoring in her mind. Across the foyer, the holiday portrait hung slightly askew from Kael's earlier assault. Its smiling faces, staff, pets, even Danny in uniform from the year before his death, seemed to tilt in silent acknowledgement. The clinic still stood because a dog had heard danger while it was only a whisper in copper and wood. Outside, sunset bled gold through lodgepole silhouettes. Inside, power remained cut while the electrician repaired wiring, but a deeper current ran unbroken, an invisible thread connecting Kael to every life under this roof. Nora rose, clipping the leash back on. "Let's go record the impossible," she told Reeves. Reeves nodded, eyes shining. "And then figure out how to honor it." Kael trotted beside them, tail swinging low and calm, as if the crisis had already faded to memory. But Nora knew better. Another page in the notebook, another proof of something vast moving just beneath the surface of the ordinary, waiting for a dog to speak its warning in barks and bright eyes. Tonight, the clinic slept unburned. And in the hush between ticking seconds, Nora swore she could hear the soft hum of unseen circuits. Not electrical, but living rewired. The moment a canine heart hit water and came up blazing with new code. Night draped the valley in indigo silk by the time Nora locked the clinic's front door. A hush settled over the parking lot. Just the hush, and the chirring of crickets, and the soft click of Kael's nails on concrete as he paced the twilight perimeter before hopping into the passenger seat of her dusty Tacoma. They drove in companionable silence up the winding forest road to Nora's cabin, headlights slicing through columns of pine. With every mile of gravel, the day's adrenaline seeped from her muscles, leaving a hush at once peaceful and unsettling, like stepping into a cathedral after battle. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and brewed chamomile. Nora slipped Kael's collar off and draped it over a hook by the door, clinking metal tags echoing in the stillness. Kael padded to the hearthrug and curled, head on paws, amber eyes tracking her movements with unspoken question. "Are you okay?" She busied herself lighting the ironwood stove, though the early summer chill hardly required it. Flame caught with a crackle, blooming gold across rough-hewn walls. Only then did she let herself slow heartbeats measuring out the edges of the quiet. On the oak dining table sat a leather notebook, open to a page half filled with today's timestamps, the lake rescue, the wire fire, the gamma spikes. At the margin, she'd written a single line in slanted penmanship. "When the student is ready, the teacher arrives." She hadn't realized she'd written it until now. Nora sank into the sofa, fingers absently tracing the frayed weave of Kael's leash coiled on the coffee table. Sun-bleached nylon, once bright police blue, now scratched by river rocks and singed by near flames. Every inch of it bore proof of her grip-tight, commanding, confident that she led, and the dog followed. But tonight, the leash looked different. Less a tool of control, more an artifact of a role already fading. She remembered her first week out of K-9 Academy, the pride of snapping that leash to a fresh-minted service collar, the rush of purpose that pummeled grief over her brother's death into something mission-shaped. Back then, giving orders felt like salvation. Clear verbs, clear stakes, no room for the vague ache of missing Danny. Yet in the span of a few dizzying days, Kael had rewritten every verb. Sit became intuition crouched over kittens. Stay turned into a dog treading water so a stranger could breathe. Speak came in the form of frantic barks that snuffed a fire not yet born. Commands didn't direct him, they translated him. She realized she'd been cargo aboard a vessel charting seas she could neither map nor name. Nora lifted the leash, thumb brushing the brass clip. The weight felt lighter than memory, emptier without the certainty it once provided. For the first time, she wondered if clipping it to Kael tomorrow would feel like putting reins on the wind. Across the room, Kael raised his head. Flame light danced in his eyes. He rose, trotted over, and hopped onto the couch uninvited, something she'd never allowed in their strict handler-partner dynamic. Tonight, she didn't shoo him off. He settled beside her, body warm against her hip, sighing a dog sigh that seemed to unspool knots inside her chest. She rested the leash across her lap. "You know I thought I was saving you," she said, voice hushed as embers. Kael tilted his head. "Turns out you were just waiting for me to notice you'd saved me first." Images flickered in the stove glow. Danny's folded flag, Kael's paws slipping off the bridge. Today's ambulance lights strobing across lake water. She realized how each moment had nudged her from grief's undertow toward a shoreline she hadn't known existed. One where listening mattered more than leading. Her phone vibrated on the table, another news alert about her canine guardian. She silenced it without looking. The world could wait one night. This revelation required privacy. Kael nosed her wrist, then delicately rested his paw atop the leash. Not claiming it, simply touching, acknowledging the object that once defined their hierarchy. In that moment, Nora felt something loosen inside, a tether slipping free control, surrendering to partnership. She set the leash down, interlaced her fingers through Kael's fur. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "We train different. I'll ask. You'll show. We'll learn together." Kael's tail thumped once, soft against the cushions. Agreement sealed. Outside, wind moved through pines, sounding for all the world like steady breathing. Nora leaned back, eyelids fluttering heavy. In the half-dream that came before true sleep, she imagined unclipping the leash for good-watching Kael, run ahead, not away, following paths only he could sense while she kept stride in trust, not command. And in that vision, she wasn't left behind. She was exactly where she belonged, walking beside the teacher she once mistook for a student, step for step, into whatever dawn awaited them both. Mountain dusk painted the granite range in bruised violets by the time Nora's Tacoma skidded into the makeshift command post. A cluster of sheriff SUVs and one rattling search and rescue trailer pitched at the trailhead of Whispering Ridge. Pine resin hung thick in cooling air, radio chatter spooled from open doors, tense threads of code and coordinates. The missing hiker, Peter Holcomb 43, diabetic type I, hadn't checked in since noon. His glucose monitor pinged one final data point 8 hours ago, then died along with his phone battery. No GPS breadcrumbs, no scent articles left behind, just a panicked voicemail to his wife. Low on juice turning back at switchback 6. Love you. That was 5 hours earlier. Darkness crawled fast in these elevations. Temperature would nosedive soon. Hypoglycemia plus exposure equaled a ticking clock. Sheriff Cordell briefed Nora the moment she swung out of the truck, Kael leaping down behind her. "We ran dogs," he said, defeat threading his baritone. "Wind shifted, trails cold, air units couldn't spot a damn thing through canopy." Nora's gaze lifted to the towering lodgepole's black spears knitting the sky. She glanced at Kael. He sat poised, ears angled toward the darkened trail as if it hummed a song only he could hear. "He doesn't need a scent," she said quietly. Cordell blinked. "Pardon?" "Let us try," Nora answered, already clipping a lightweight vest onto Kael. reflective tabs catching the last scraps of day. She'd brought no scent article. Kael had refused to sniff Holcomb's hat when offered, giving a soft whine of disdain, as though the cloth was irrelevant to his quarry. Tonight, she trusted that refusal. They entered the trailhead alone. SAR team begrudging but hopeful. Nora carried only flashlight, glucose gel packs, and the unspoken promise she'd made nights ago. Ask, don't command. She unclipped the leash. Lead when you're ready. Kael padded forward, nose low, not to ground but to air, sampling currents invisible to human eyes. He passed switchback 1, where boot prints peppered the dust. Past switchback 2, where standard trackers had lost the trail to shale. At 3, he paused, head tilting as if triangulating ghost signals between moss-coated trunks. Nora noted the subtle tremor in his flanks, the gamma pulse she'd learned to read without machines. He veered off marked path into undergrowth. Nora followed crunch of needles underfoot, branches clawing sleeves. Darkness thickened. Her beam slashed between trunks, catching motes of pollen swirling like tiny galaxies. Kael moved steadily, not sniffing ground but scanning horizon, ears rotating, tail a metronome of certainty. Half an hour in, he stopped on a granite outcrop overlooking a ravine cloaked in shadow. He emitted a low woof, nostrils flaring at the void below. Nora knelt, shining her light into the gulch nothing but tangled deadfall and moonlit ferns. "You sure?" she murmured. Kael answered by descending the steep embankment, claws finding purchase on slick stone. Heart thudding, Nora followed, sliding on her haunch, grabbing roots to slow momentum. The ravine floor smelled of rot and fern spice. Somewhere water trickled. Kael padded upstream along a nearly invisible deer track, every few yards glancing back to ensure Nora kept pace. 15 minutes later, he halted again, ears pricked, body rigid. He barked sharp. Nora's flashlight beam leapt ahead and found a hiking boot protruding from bracken. "Peter Holcomb!" she called, rushing forward. The man lay on his side, pale lips crusted with dirt, breath rasping so faintly she feared it would blink out. His glucose meter lay shattered nearby, his pack, open, spilled with granola he'd been too weak to chew. She knelt, slipped a gel pack between cracked lips, massaged his throat. Another. His eyelids fluttered. A thin groan escaped. Kael pressed his nose against the man's cheek as if lending heat. Nora radioed coordinates, voice shaking. Subject located ravine north-northwest of switchback 4. Vitals weak but present. Request stretcher and med evac. She looked at Kael. "You found him with no trail to follow. How?" Kael merely sat, watching Holcomb breathe, eyes soft with a knowledge beyond language. 20 minutes later, headlamps bobbed through trees as Sayar descended. Medics took over, starting IV dextrose. Sheriff Cordell knelt beside Nora while crews packaged Holcomb. "Dogs lost scent 200 yards upslope," he said, awe tempering his fatigue. "Your boy walked a line straight to him." Nora stroked Kael's neck, feeling pulse steady beneath fur. "He listens to things we don't," she answered. "Maybe heartbeats on the wind. Maybe fear itself." Cordell exhaled, shook his head. "Whatever it is, he bought that man another tomorrow." As rescuers hoisted the litter, Holcomb's eyes drifted open, glazing past flashlights to settle on Kael. He managed a whisper hoarse, barely air. "Angel?" Kael answered with a quiet woof, tail sweeping the pine needles. Back at the trailhead, media already gathered, Lake Carson footage had primed the pump. But tonight Nora wrapped Kael in a thermal blanket, loaded him into the Tacoma before reporters could swarm. She gave a terse statement. K9 located subject, rescue successful. Then drove into the dark, leaving camera flashes dying like fireflies in the rearview mirror. On the winding descent, Kael's head rested on the console. Moonlight silvered his muzzle, lending him an otherworldly calm. Nora gripped the wheel, throat thick with something between pride and humility. "You didn't track," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "You heard him." A heartbeat in the pines, a glucose-starved cell registering fear, consciousness bridging across wilderness. Kael's ear twitched, as if acknowledging. He closed his eyes, finally at rest. And somewhere behind them, in a medic truck rattling toward the hospital, Peter Holcomb began to stabilize, saved by a dog who followed no rule book but the quiet frequencies of human need whispering through the trees. Snowmelt mist still clung to Granite Hollow Memorial Hospital's glass facade the next morning, when Nora and Kael padded through its sliding doors. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The corridor smelled faintly of antiseptic and breakfast oatmeal. They'd come at Dr. Reeves's urging. Lisa Chen, the wildlife photographer Kael had pulled from a ridge 3 weeks earlier, had finally requested to see the dog who heard her. Room 214 overlooked a pocket garden where columbines nodded in summer breeze. Lisa reclined against pillows, ankle encased in a boot brace, camera magazines strewn across bed like bright feathers. Bruises had faded to muted golds. Freckles stood out on cheeks warmed by sunlight. When Kael stepped inside, she inhaled sharply. Not fear, but recognition that seemed almost preordained. "That's him," she breathed, eyes shining. "The dog I saw." Nora introduced herself, then let Kael approach at his own pace. He padded forward, nose quivering, and gently rested his chin on the mattress edge. Lisa's fingers hesitated mid-air, then buried in his ruff. Tears welled. "You said you hallucinated him," Nora began gently, pulling a chair bedside. "Tell us what you remember." Lisa closed her eyes. "I was lying at the base of that ledge, couldn't move, pain screaming through my leg. Night was coming. I kept drifting, fighting to stay conscious." She swallowed. "At one point, I pictured help. Not just any help, specifically a German shepherd. Don't ask me why. My family had mutts growing up, never shepherds. But the image was vivid. Golden eyes, quiet strength. I focused on that face and thought, if you're real, find me." Her gaze flicked to Kael. "Next thing I remember, his nose was in my palm." She thumbed away a tear. "I wasn't hallucinating. I was calling." Dr. Reeves, standing at the foot of the bed, scribbled notes. "When you visualized the dog, did you hear or sense anything? Sound, smell, warmth?" Lisa nodded slowly. "It felt like a heartbeat, steady, far off, getting closer every time I pictured him." Nora exchanged a glance with Reeves. The scientist tapped her pen against her clipboard. "We suspect Kael operates on a form of bioelectromagnetic resonance. Your focused imagery might have generated a coherent neural signal. Think of it as emotional sonar." "A two-way bridge," Nora added. "He didn't smell you. He heard your need." Lisa exhaled a trembling laugh. "So my desperate daydream turned into GPS?" "Maybe more like a beacon," Reeves said. "Humans emit subtle fields, heartbeat, neural firing. Intense visualization can amplify coherence. Kael's heightened pathways may tune to those frequencies." Kael shifted, pressing closer until his fur brushed Lisa's blanket-covered legs. Her monitor blipped a gentle uptick heart rate, settling, not spiking. She stroked behind his ear, voice hushed. I kept seeing a river of light in the dark, like threads connecting stars. He walked along it straight to me. Reeves's pen froze mid-sentence. Threads? She repeated, eyes narrowing in thought. Nora folded her hands. Lisa, would you be willing to undergo a short EEG while interacting with Kael? Non-invasive. We're mapping potential synchrony. Lisa cracked a smile. If it helps the hero, hook me up. Within 20 minutes, a portable headset ringed Lisa's brow. Reeves clipped a matching sensor to Kael's collar. The instant Lisa laid both hands on Kael's shoulders, twin traces spiked on Reeves's tablet sign waves, synchronizing, heartbeats aligning within milliseconds. Look at that, Reeves whispered. Phase-locking human alpha waves, mirroring canine gamma bursts. Lisa closed her eyes. I'm picturing the ridge again, the fall, the fear. Kael's ears flicked, his trace pulsed. Across the screen, Lisa's alpha shifted to theta-deep visualization. Kael's gamma climbed, then leveled, matching her brain's frequency reduction. Reeves exhaled awe. Real-time coupling. A nurse peeked in, wide-eyed. Everything okay? Better than okay, Nora answered, eyes never leaving the screen. After the test, Lisa removed the headset, cheeks damp with silent tears. He found me twice now, once on that mountain, and again in my memory. Nora squeezed her shoulder. You weren't alone either time. As they left, Lisa called after them, voice steady. Use whatever data you need. The world deserves to know what a dog can teach us about listening. Back in the hallway, Reeves halted beneath a skylight, datapad clutched like a holy text. Two-way connection confirmed. Visualization on her end modulates his neural activity, conscious intent as signal. Nora thought of Danny's funeral, the prayers she'd whispered into folded flags, unanswered by silence. Maybe the universe had been listening all along. She just didn't have the receiver. She looked down at Kael. You're not just hearing us, she murmured. We're speaking back. Kael wagged once, a soft percussion in the sterile corridor. Reeves's eyes gleamed. Next step, controlled imagery trials. Volunteers conjure specific scenarios. We track his responses. If we can quantify intent-driven resonance, Nora raised a hand. Carefully. He's still a living being, not a lab endpoint. Reeves softened. Agreed. But think of what this means. Search and rescue teams could amplify victim signals through guided visualization. Early seizure alerts. PTSD intervention. First, let's give him steak and a lake day, Nora said, smile teasing. The rest can wait till tomorrow. They exited into afternoon sun that warmed the parking lot asphalt. Kael trotted ahead, backlit by a light so bright it seemed to erase the shadow of any doubt Nora once carried. She realized then the leash in her pocket wasn't a tether, but a lifeline to a deeper frequency connecting hearts, fears, hopes. And Kael, padding toward the truck with tail high, was no longer just the receiver. He was the signal itself, broadcasting a truth humanity was only beginning to translate. We're heard, even in silence. Night folded around the clinic like a velvet curtain, but the lab room, formerly Exam Room 3, glowed electric beneath LED track lights and a tangle of repurposed sensors. Empty cages had been replaced by rolling carts of equipment. Synchronized EEG rigs, Faraday-shielded laptops, a coil of fiber-optic cable feeding data to a server Nora could only describe as Frankenstein's jukebox. In the center of it all sat Kael on a fleece mat, unflinching amid the low whir of fans and the flicker of oscilloscopes blooming aurora green curves across black screens. Dr. Alma Reeves stood before a whiteboard, now so crowded with equations and color-coded arrows it resembled an architect's blueprint for the impossible. She dragged the marker down a final column, then stepped back, arms folded, lips pursed in a thin, determined line. Nora hovered by the doorway, a steaming mug forgotten in her hand, trying to tether her sense of reality to the sterile smell of isopropyl and the subdued rhythm of Kael's breathing. Reeves capped her pen with a decisive click. "All right." She turned to Nora. "Old hypothesis. Kael possesses hyperacute perception external, sensory-driven. New hypothesis." She tapped the board, where bidirectional resonance was scrawled in bold red. "He's not merely sensing distress. He's receiving directed cognitive imagery and rebroadcasting matching action potentials, effectively a two-way channel." Nora set the mug on a metal tray, heart thudding in her throat. "You're saying what Lisa pictured became something Kael could trace like a signal." "More than trace." Reeves pulled up the latest data set on a tablet. During Lisa's visualization, her EEG shifted into coherent theta packets internal narrative mode. Simultaneously, Kael's gamma synchrony spiked, but get this. She zoomed into a millisecond-scale graph-thread-thin pulses interlacing every 180 milliseconds. He didn't just mirror her frequency, he led it by 12 milliseconds. That suggests receipt, processing, and instant relay. He anticipated her mental imagery. Nora's gaze darted to Kael. The shepherd blinked, calm amber eyes flicking from woman to woman as though eavesdropping on knowledge he'd long accepted. The collar sensor on his neck pulsed a soft blue glow, idle, yet ever listening. Reeves paced, the scientist's razor energy poised on a wire. "We need to recalibrate every protocol. No more one-way scent tests. We introduce controlled visualization prompts. Subjects imagine distinct sensory scenes. We test Kael's response without environmental cues. If he acts, we document lead lag intervals, amplitude, synaptic resonance." Nora swallowed. "And if he keeps leading?" "Then consciousness bridging isn't a poetic metaphor. It's measurable neurophenomenology." Reeves's voice trembled with excitement and a hint of reverence. "Think. Disaster victims picturing rescue dogs and broadcasting their location. Children with epilepsy picturing help before a seizure. PTSD patients picturing calm and getting real-time grounding from a partner like Kael." Nora stepped closer to Kael, kneeling until her eyes met his. She thought back to the bridge sun flaring off water, the leash snapping from her hand, his body disappearing into the river like a stone flung by fate. Was that moment the lightning strike, she wondered, or the doorway he was always meant to walk through? "He fell," she whispered, stroking the silvered fur at his shoulder. "But maybe the world fell open with him." Kael leaned into her palm, exhaling a slow sigh. The collar's blue pulse brightened, reading her heart's quickened cadence. Reeves softened, kneeling opposite. "I keep replaying that footage," she murmured. "You look away for a heartbeat, the leash slips and physics says end of story, yet he surfaces alive. What if that trauma impact, hypoxia, surge of stress hormones rebooted dormant neural circuits waiting for exactly such a threshold?" "It scares me," Nora admitted, voice gone small in the electronic glare. Not just what he can do, but what people will want from him when they learn the truth. Reeves's eyes flicked to the board's corner. A bullet list titled Ethical Safeguards. She tapped it with the marker's end. We publish selectively peer review, anonymized. We control narrative. Emphasize partnership, welfare, non-militarization. I already drafted an ethics protocol. Kael's consent mediated through you as legal steward. Any funding requires open access and non-proprietary application. Nora's shoulders eased a fraction. He's family. Then family remains the gatekeeper, Reeves affirmed. Kael suddenly lifted his head, gaze snapping toward the doorway before so much as a footstep sounded. A second later, Dr. Wilson appeared, tie askew, phone in hand. Sorry to barge code orange at Ridgeview Senior Home. Gas leak, possible explosion risk. Fire crew en route. Nora and Reeves exchanged a look, no words needed. Kael stood, the blue pulse on his collar strobing to brilliant white, ready. Wilson glanced at the dog, half awed, half expectant. You taking him? Nora clipped the leash out of habit, not necessity. He'll tell me where to stand. Reeves gathered a handheld recorder, voice already dictating new parameters. Field log, potential mass casualty scenario. Subject Kael deploying under bidirectional resonance hypothesis. Monitor for anticipatory divergence. They moved as one handler, scientist, dog out through the clinic's back door into crisp mountain night. Above, stars glittered like punctures in black silk, silent witnesses to thresholds crossed in breaths and paw steps. Nora slid into the Tacoma, adrenaline sharpening her focus. As the engine rumbled awake, she realized her hands no longer trembled at the unknown. Instead, they steadied on the wheel, guided by faith not just in the dog beside her, but in the invisible threads connecting her heartbeat to his. She glanced at Kael. Lead when you're ready. He pressed a paw to the dashboard, an answer, a promise. The collar's light flared signal received, and they roared down the gravel road, leaving behind the fluorescent glow of the clinic for the dark terrain where human senses falter and Kael's new compass comes alive. Behind them, in the now silent lab, Reeves's whiteboard gleamed beneath overhead LEDs. The words, consciousness bridging, framed by equations that no longer felt like speculation, but like the fledgling grammar of a new language, the one Kael had been speaking ever since that plunge through air and water, the moment the ordinary world split and let him through. Dawn lifted slow over Granite Ridge, mist rising from the Elkhorn River like breath from a sleeping giant. The bridge, once marred by caution tape, stood in quiet majesty, its repaired guardrail gleaming silver. Fresh paint softened by weather, but the scar in Nora's memory stayed sharp. She parked, heart racing, and opened the passenger door. Kael leapt down without a leash, paws soft on dew-wet asphalt. He inhaled the river chill, body steady as a sentry on sacred ground. Behind them, Dr. Alma Reeves noted vitals silently. This moment belonged to Nora and Kael. Nora tugged her beanie low and followed Kael onto the bridge. Each step groaned underfoot, echoing last year's scream, but Nora focused on the present. Gulls gliding, salmon flickering, sunrise gilding the rail. Kael moved with purpose, weaving through joggers unaware of the bridge's history. Mid-span, he stopped, the exact spot. Nora's breath caught. Kael touched the new steel, listening rather than panting or whining. Nora watched the ripple rise along his spine, not fear but reverence. His eyes reflected unseen currents, the river's hum, trout heartbeats, pylons groaning against stone. Kael closed his eyes. For a heartbeat, dawn light rippled across his fur like water. Nora remembered the plunge, the leash snapping free, the water's shock. The memory threatened to drown her, until Kael touched her knee, grounding her. His gaze said what words couldn't. That day was a door, not an end. Nora knelt, whispering, "What do you hear, partner?" Kael placed his paw on her hand. A hum filled her bones. The river's pulse, threads of thought, fragments of birdsong, even the faint tick of Reeves's tablet far behind. For a breath she was Kael, feeling metal slip, water close around lungs, then rise, carried by something stronger than physics. The world snapped back, sharper in color, deeper in meaning. Kael withdrew his paw, saluted the river with a sweep of his tail, then faced the forests ahead. "You're not anchored here," Nora said. "This was the mile marker." Kael's nod was clear. He trotted toward Reeves. Nora followed, feeling the leash light in her pocket. Gravity had severed more than nylon that day. It had opened her ears. Reeves met them with awe. His gamma spiked the moment you touched. Your patterns synchronized for 3 seconds. Nora laughed shakily, long enough to hear the river think. They walked back, sunlight rising. Gratitude, soft as mist, replaced fear. Nora touched the cold steel in thanks and turned to join Kael, already mapping unseen frequencies. They took a side trail to a concrete spur over the river. Reeves stayed at the overlook, her recorder in Nora's pocket. At the platform's edge, Kael's ears flicked at sounds Nora couldn't detect. He stepped close, placed his paw over her heart, and time held its breath. Nora's senses exploded. Water below spiraled in aquamarine light. Footsteps above became amber ripples. She saw temperature sunlight as golden embers on Kael's fur, shade as blue-violet. Scents became shapes. Pine as green triangles, barbecue smoke as amber spirals. A trout's fear pulsed red upriver. Their heartbeats merged, hers rose gold, his copper braiding into a harmony that hummed through her bones. Overwhelmed, Nora gasped, knees wobbling. Kael steadied her gently, holding space as she explored this layered world. She sensed creatures miles away, felt Reeves's curiosity flare violet at the overlook. Awe and humility flooded her. She saw past commands as brittle, shed illusions. Kael's steady rhythm answered, "You've been listening." Her legs buckled, and Kael supported her until she knelt. Slowly the colors and sounds receded, leaving ordinary reality behind. She gasped out a laugh. "That nearly took me apart." Kael nuzzled her. She recorded the moment, voice trembling. First full transmission, extreme crosstalk, profound emotional resonance, zero fear. Reeves came running, breathless. Kael's vitals spiked. "What happened?" "He showed me the everything," Nora said, still dazed. Reeves's eyes widened as she examined the data. Synchronized coupling across brainwaves, like cosmic gears turning. Kael sat calmly, as if it were nothing. But Nora knew this was just the beginning. Back at the overlook, Reeves set up her EEG gear, awed by the data. Kael approached, placed his paw over Reeves's heart, and opened her senses too. She gasped, tears falling, awestruck by the hidden symphony revealed. Data overflowed, proof of a bridge between minds forming in real time. Reeves whispered, "Revolutionary." But Nora knew the weight of that word. Breakthrough, yes, but also scrutiny, responsibility, the need for protection. They had crossed a threshold. The world and the bond between species would never be the same again. Rain needled the cabin's tin roof, threading dusk with a relentless percussion that sounded like gunfire. Nora sat at the small kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a cold mug. Her laptop glowed with headline drafts about Kael's breakthrough, but words blurred into phantom phrases from the past. Officer down. Fatal firefight. Survivors. Vance, N. Outside, the wind hurled pine boughs against the shutters. Each thud dropped her heart into old, dark memories. Kael lay on the braided rug, eyes half-lidded, ears flicking like radar. Nora rubbed the scars on her knuckles. Tomorrow marked 3 years since Danny's name was etched on the town's granite wall. She meant to visit at dawn, but the thought of that stone felt like walking barefoot on ice. Danny's blood-blackened badge on a coroner's tray flashed through her mind, her scream sealed behind pressed lips. Panic rose. Kael crossed the room, leaning his weight against her shin, a living brace. She sank to the floor, forehead to her knees. Panic clawed for release, but beneath it pulsed another rhythm. Kael's heartbeat, solid against her thigh. No demands, no interventions, just breath, weight, gravity. Matching his breath, she calmed. The reins softened. The vice loosened around her chest. Kael lifted his head, eyes full of recognition, not pity. I watched the storm. I stayed until it passed. A single tear fell. She cupped his muzzle. You felt it before I did. Kael pressed his nose into her palm. Together they sat in the quiet, the miracle of connection stitching a wound words hadn't touched. The next morning, dawn smeared gray across Granite Hollow. Nora, with Kael and a thermos of coffee, stepped onto the porch. The dam's alerts blinked green, but Kael froze, nose lifted, a tremor along his shoulders. His harness LED shifted from amber to crimson, a danger signal Nora had never seen. Kael bolted, Nora close behind toward town. The firehouse captain blinked in surprise as Kael barked at the comms desk. He's signaling catastrophic risk, Nora said. Skeptical at first, the captain called for dam telemetry. The line crackled, then fell silent. Reeves texted, Kael collar spike, gamma threshold 10.1 UV. What's happening? Nora typed back, possible dam emergency. Evacuation began. Kael moved among people, guiding stragglers, pressing his muzzle to a deaf woman's hand. At 8:42 a.m., as the last bus cleared Riverbend Avenue, a thunderous crack roared. A brown wall of water burst around the bend, swallowing bridges and battering empty streets. But the floodplain lay empty. You saved them, Nora whispered, rain mixing with tears. News helicopters filmed the aftermath. Town evacuates. Minutes before dam breach credit goes to canine named Kael. Reeves found Nora. The harness recorded magnetic spikes before the dam's own sensors. Nora watched Kael greet children under blankets, parents calling him a guardian angel. He took a granola bar delicately from a small hand, tail wagging. By the next dawn, Granite Hollow's streets lay clean, the floodwaters gone. Kael, harness off, dozed under the white oak outside the clinic, sensor pulsing a calm blue. Children appeared, drawn as if by the oak's whisper. One by one, they settled near him, touching his fur, sharing quiet joy. Kael lay still, soaking in their laughter, his presence magnifying their peace. From the porch, Nora watched, heart aching with gratitude. A little girl offered Kael a dandelion. He accepted it gently. The children giggled, patting the grass in rhythm to his thumping tail. When a parent arrived, tears rimmed his eyes. He mouthed thank you to Nora, who raised her mug in return. As the town stirred to life, Kael rolled to his back, inviting belly rubs. His sensor flickered emerald, then settled back to blue. Nora crouched beneath the oak. "You good, Professor?" she asked. Kael offered a contented huff, eyes half closed. A boy asked, "Is he tired from saving everybody?" "Not tired," Nora said, "just resting his superhero signal." A girl raised her hand. "Can he hear happy things too?" "I think he feels them the way we feel sunshine warms him, even when he's not looking." Kael's tail thumped. And so Granite Hollow's new day began. Without sirens, without headlines, only quiet joy echoing through a shepherd's steady heart. Rain hammered the cabin's tin roof like relentless percussion. Nora sat at the kitchen table, fingers around a cold mug, headline drafts about Kael glowing on her laptop, but words blurred into memories. Officer down. Fatal firefight. Survivors. Vance. N. Wind hurled pine boughs against the shutters. Each thud sent her heart into older, darker places. Across the room, Kael lay on the rug, eyes half-lidded, ears flicking, as if scanning for storms invisible to anyone else. Tomorrow marked 3 years since Danny's name was etched on a granite wall. The thought of facing that stone felt like walking barefoot on ice. When the panic rose breath trapped, vision tunneling Kael crossed the room, leaning against her shin. She slid to the floor, forehead pressed to knees, air ragged. But Kael stayed a steady warmth against her side, heartbeat solid. Slowly, she matched her breathing to his. Minutes stretched. Rain softened. The panic tide receded. When she looked up, his amber eyes held no pity, only quiet presence. "You felt it before I did," she whispered, cupping his muzzle. Together they breathed the cabin's hush, the miracle of connection stitching a wound that words could not. Gray dawn smeared across Granite Hollow. On the porch, Kael paused, nose lifted, tension rippling through him. His harness LED flared crimson, a color Nora had never seen outside drills. "Show me," she said. Kael bolted. Rain blurred the streets as he led her to the firehouse. Inside, Kael barked sharp, insistent, until Captain Alvarez grabbed the radio. Dam control reported nothing unusual. Then silence. Kael barked again, nails scraping tile. Reeves's text came fast. Environmental EM surge detected along reservoir grid. Nora ordered pre-evacuation. Sirens wailed, buses filled. Kael moved through crowds, nudging stragglers, guiding a deaf woman to safety. At 8:42 a.m., the dam failed. A brown wall of water tore through the valley. But the town was empty. Kael's warning had saved them. By afternoon, cameras filmed empty streets, spared devastation. The news scroll read, "Town evacuates minutes before dam breach credit goes to K9, named Kael." Kael's harness had recorded the surge before instruments did. He felt the dam's groan, the fracture before it came. That evening, as the town exhaled relief, Kael greeted survivors, not seeking praise, only offering presence. Children huddled near, parents called him guardian angel, and Nora knew the truth. Kael didn't just warn of storms. He stayed until they passed. Dawn brought gold light over cleaned streets. Beneath an old oak, Kael lay at ease, harness off, blue light of rest on his collar. Children found him one by one, drawn by the quiet hero. Milo Reyes ran fingers through his fur. The Delacroix twins sat nearby. Soon, laughter filled the air. Little Hannah offered Kael a dandelion. He accepted with gentle teeth, laying his head in her lap. Nora watched, Heart heavy but sweet, Kael not only sensed danger but magnified joy. A sparrow chirped, his tail thumped in rhythm. Sorrow rested in that cadence. Parents called kids to breakfast. One by one, small hands patted Kael farewell. Hannah kissed his nose. Sophia promised to read him a story next time. When all had gone, Kael rose, shook off petals, and trotted to Nora. She scratched his chin. "Ready for cleanup, Professor?" He nudged her mug caretaker's needs understood, and wagged. Together, they stepped into the new day. No sirens, no headlines, just a shepherd who listened, and a town that was safe because he did. Sunlight poured over Capitol Plaza like liquid brass, glinting off marble columns and dignitaries' polished shoes. 2 rows of uniformed officers flanked the crimson carpet leading to the podium. Granite Hollow residents, first responders, and those Kael had saved gathered with handmade signs. "Thank you, Guardian. Our hero has paws." Exactly 2 years had passed since the German Shepherd pup fell from Granite Ridge Bridge and changed the meaning of rescue. Today, the governor would pin the State Medal of Extraordinary Service on him. Backstage, Nora adjusted Kael's navy vest, smoothing the fabric above the stitched bridge silhouette. Kael stood calm, anticipation humming through him, not for applause, but for the swell of shared emotion. Bagpipes played. The crowd rose, clapping like waves against dignity's shore. Kael walked steady beside Nora, gaze sweeping faces, posture proud yet humble. Governor Reyes spoke. 2 years ago, a puppy fell from a bridge and rose with a gift none imagined. Today we honor countless lives saved and the power of empathy. She knelt, breaking protocol, and held the medal for Kael's approval. He sniffed once approved. The medal rested on his chest as applause thundered. Many wept. The Dawsons with toddler Hannah, the swimmer saved beneath Lake Carson's surface, even firefighters recalling battles fought beside Kael. Nora's voice trembled at the podium. Kael reminds us that listening saves lives, not just to alarms, but to fear, hope, joy. He's not a weapon. He's a bridge. Later, a boy pressed a daisy into Kael's fur. "You heard us, even when we didn't shout." Kael's head lowered gently, the medal chiming. Evening wrapped the cabin in quiet. Kael lay before the hearth, medal resting on the mantel among tokens of their journey. Nora stood at the window, coiling Kael's first training leash, a symbol of control no longer needed. She placed it on the sill, realizing at last, Kael never needed guidance, only partnership. She poured tea, sitting beside him in silence, their favorite language. Kael's presence, his simple touch, said more than words. The next day, at Granite Ridge, Kael sat on the plank where he once fell, facing the horizon. No medal, no harness, just a dog contemplating the world. Nora arrived with a lily, placing it by the new plaque. He didn't fall. He rose through what should have ended him. Together, they watched the sunset deepen into night. Crickets sang. The river below mirrored the last light. Nora whispered, 2 years, it feels like yesterday. It feels like another lifetime. Kael's tail swept once. Agreement, both truths. Neither spoke. They listened to the hum of the bridge, to the world's quiet signals. Nora felt again the synesthetic world Kael once showed her, lives coexisting, peace as a living palette. As stars appeared, Kael gazed west, reading currents of possibility. Nora followed, seeing only darkness, but finally understanding. He wasn't looking back. He was listening for what came next. She stepped aside. "Lead the way." Kael turned, tail wagging, and padded toward the bridge's exit. Nora followed, no leash, no fear, guided by the certainty that some beings don't fall. They rise, carrying others forward into horizons alive with promise. And together they walked into starlight, leaving behind a bridge that hummed its quiet vow. The rise had only just begun. Across every chapter of Kael's journey runs a single bright thread. When we open our hearts to animals, they return the gift 1,000-fold. German shepherds embody that truth with uncommon grace. Loyal yet fearless, sensitive yet strong, born listeners to the whispers we ignore. Kael's story reminds us that real power lies not in domination, but in connection. Sensing another's fear, answering it with presence, recognizing unspoken hope, lifting it into action. In a world quick to divide, a dog taught an entire town, then a state, that empathy travels faster than sirens and builds bridges sturdier than steel. Let his paw prints guide us. Honor every creature's innate wisdom, protect gifts that can't be patented, and lead by listening first. Whether we rescue or are rescued, love remains the truest signal, a quiet force capable of steering us through darkness to the next dawn. May Kael's legacy inspire us to look forward, to reach out, and to walk beside every living being with trust, curiosity, and unshakable kindness.